G'day and welcome back to the Sci-Fi Shed, where we rank and review Hugo and Nebula award-winning books. Tonight I've got a special treat. We're going to take a look at Daniel Keyes' Flowers for Algernon, which won the Hugo in 1960, pardon me. It came out in 1959. It won the Hugo for the best short story that year, and it was later expanded and turned into a novel, which won the 1966 Nebula. And that will be the main focus of our leaderboard. Plus, I'll also give you a bit of a contrast and comparison between these, the short story and the novel. So Daniel Keyes started off, I think, writing one of the best short stories of all times. Flowers for Algernon, by far, and maybe for the exception of one or two short stories, is right up there as far as the best sci-fi short stories out there. And it follows this guy called Charlie Gordon, who's got a very low IQ, is referred to as retarded in the novel. Which is probably not quite politically correct these days, but that's what the novel sort of suggests. And he's very challenged when it comes to his intelligence. And the book is written in this epistolary fashion where we're reading Charlie's own handwritten notes as he goes through these basically his progress reports. He's been tasked to write progress reports so they can sort of track how he's going. And so what we find during these progress reports is that Charlie Gordon is a subject for an experiment, basically, where they want to surgically improve his IQ, the means of which is not really explained. So this is not a hard sci-fi book. And honestly, apart from the fact that, we're talking about a science fiction type surgery that is not available today, there's not really much hard science fiction in this book at all, which I think will really appeal to a lot of different genres and to a lot of different people. And for that, it's, like I said, it's one of the best short fiction books that I've read. So they follow the story of Charlie Gordon and his progress reports. And there's, like I said, there's not much hard science fiction as far as the operation goes. We just know that he's going to go through some kind of surgery, and we learn these through all the progress reports that Charlie Gordon is writing. And that, at the beginning of the book, is really where I think this book shines, because it really does make you feel like you're reading this, account of someone who's either, very young, or is mentally challenged, or just doesn't know how to spell, because the book is written very phonetically at the beginning. There's no punctuations, a lot of spelling mistakes, and you find that as his experiment takes place and he starts to gain slowly some understanding and some intelligence, you find that the grammar and the writing and the punctuation in the novel throughout improves. And it's just, I think, one of the highlights of the book. I loved it. I just love the fact that you can really see the progress of this young gentleman, Charlie Gordon. And it's just, it's really a great book. It paints short story. Let me just start by saying it's a great short story, because you really get the feel for Charlie Gordon and some of the challenges he goes through in his quest to improve his intelligence. And part of that understanding also starts to reflect on his memory, and he starts to sort of gain a bit of an understanding of how he was really treated. So Charlie basically, he works two different jobs. In the short story, he works in a factory. In the novel, he works for a bakery, or is it vice versa? Factories in the short story, bakeries in the novel. And what we find is that he's getting bullied. Like, who he thinks are his friends are indeed not his friends, and they're laughing at his expense. But Charlie's oblivious to it. He just doesn't understand that this is happening, and he's just happy to call them his friends, and he believes that they're not laughing at him, but with him. And as his intelligence grows, as the text starts to develop, punctuation and prose, we start to see this different version of Charlie as he starts to battle with his background, where he's come from, and where he wants to go. And at this point in the novel is where, and the short story and the novel starts to differ, because the short story and the novel up until this point are almost identical. But even then, the novel starts to expand on some of the simple things at the beginning of the book that really portray that innocence of Charlie. And right from the onset, the novel already starts to add additional words, starts to pad the dialogue, which I think really detracts from it. Like, I just wish they had left it like they did in the short story, because I think the novel with the additional padding really starts to separate the two, and maybe I'm starting to give a little bit away as to where my preferences go here. But then the middle of the book is where things really are different. So the short story, simpleton, has a desire to learn, goes through this experiment, we see his progression, and all we really learn from Charlie is he's just a likable, lovable soul. He honestly is just a loving, adorable soul. And the way he's treated by his so-called friends is just absolutely heartbreaking. It's terrible. And what makes it terrible is I think we've all experienced this in life. And it's just wrong, and it should never happen. And it brings me to tears just thinking about it. And that's what the short story just does so wonderfully. It just captures that oppression, that bullying, that lying, taking for advantage, innocence, and it's wonderful. But then we get into the novel, which begins by expanding the middle section of the book. And what you don't get in the short story, which is really apparent in the novel, is the relationship that Charlie has with his family, some of the flashbacks, the challenges he has with women. But really where I think the novel loses the appeal for me, I'm going to be straight out and say it, where I lost interest almost with the novel is that as Charlie improves on his intelligence, we start to find that Charlie is not really a nice guy. At least he doesn't become a nice person. So where he wanted to gain friends, the book starts with him wanting to gain friends, wanting to be smart so he could gain new friends and have acquaintances and be involved in society. What we find in a novel, which is a contrast to the short story, is that as he gains knowledge and he becomes a genius, I think he ends up with an IQ of something like 160. What we find is that Charlie Gordon, despite all his knowledge, is just not a nice guy. And it's not that he's wicked in any way, it's just that he's very self-obsessed, he's very bitter, and probably for right reasons. I mean, he's a very believable character, let me say that. Charlie Gordon, both in his simplicity and complexity, is a very believable character. But unfortunately for me, we get to see a part of Charlie in the novel that you don't see much of in the short story. And for me, that wrecks it. That wrecks the novel. That wrecks that innocence, especially towards the latter part of the book. And I don't want to talk about the latter part of the book because I don't want to give away anything. I don't want to sort of explain what happens, because that is, again, part of the beauty of the short book, of the short story rather. So yeah, look, Hugo short story, and honestly, I rate it. If this ladder system behind us was a Hugo short story and Nebula short story, it'll be a different story altogether. But before I say too much, let me talk a little bit more about the novel itself. So, very worthy winner of the short story. Definitely one of the best short stories, and it deserved to get the Hugo short story winner in 1960, as does the novel. I don't want you guys to dish the novel, because that's not what this is about. Remember, all these books on the Hugo and Nebula award system are all highly acclaimed books. They are all brilliant books. and they all deserve a place on this ladder. Don't get me wrong. But it's really hard when you have to compare the short story to the novel. And for me, the short story is just a wonderful piece of literature. Now, one thing I want to say about the book as well, it is categorized as science fiction and has been awarded many science fiction awards. But it's not a hard sci-fi. So when we talk about the experiment, it doesn't go into the science of the experiment. Literally all we find out, both in the short story and the novel, is that his intelligence is going to be surgically improved. And we don't know what that is, which is very unlike some of the hard science fiction books that are out there. So this book, who would I recommend it to? Science fiction. The only thing for me that makes this book science fiction is the fact that this procedure is not available today. So if you could surgically improve someone's intelligence, it's the only element of science fiction in this book. So it's a very great introduction to science fiction. It's a wonderful introduction to science fiction because you're starting with definitely one of the best short stories and one of the best novels of all time. And it's not hard science fiction. It's not about, space travel or about aliens or about time travel. It's just this simple guy who has an operation, who gains intelligence, and we see the journey that he goes on. So who's this Algernon fellow? What's Flowers for Algernon about? Algernon is basically this test science lab mouse that they've been experimenting on, and he's had the same operation that Charlie's had. So they've surgically improved his intelligence, and they're using Algernon as a test subject, and they're comparing his results to Charlie Gordon's. And we won't go any more than that. So highly recommended, wonderful short story, wonderful novel. Let's go back to the Charlie Gordon, and I just did a Charlie Gordon. Let's go back to the Sci-Fi Shed ladder and see where we'll rank this wonderful book. So let's take a look where Flowers for Algernon sits on our Hugo and Nebula Winning Sci-Fi Shed ladder. Now, let me stress this again. All of these books are wonderful books. Every single one of them is worthy of a Hugo, worthy of a Nebula, and worthy of being on top of anyone's ladder. I just want to stress that because I'm finding it really difficult and challenging to start to decide where these sit and where they rank. But this is where I'm sitting today, and I'm sure that if I was to reread these books in a couple of years, they'd probably be in a different order. But here we are, and we've got another really difficult choice to make. Flowers for Algernon, David Keyes, 1966 novel. Now this is a very important thing. This is going to be the novels and how they rank for both Hugo and Nebula, and we're not going to rank the short stories. So this is purely going to be on the novels, because I'm telling you, if this was about short stories and novels, I'd whack Flowers for Algernon right there. It's a wonderful short story, a very quick read. You really get the sense of just how beautiful of a person Charlie Gordon is, and it remains that way through the novel. Yes, he does go through some challenges in the middle part of the book, but you never lose the essence of just what a wonderful soul Charlie Gordon is, and how much he deserves to get what he gets in life, or what he wants to achieve in life, let me say. But like I said, this is all about the novels, and that's why I've got Nebula, 1966 award winner, which it co-won actually with Babel 17 by Delany. So we'll be reviewing that as well. So where do we sit then? Is it better than Waystation, the novel form? Is it better than The Left Hand of Darkness, Ursula Le Guin? Oh man, it's a tough one. But I'm going to say, the novel, I think, loses something, and I wish it had remained as a short story, because the short story is a wonderful piece of literature, and like I said, I'll rank it way up there as one of the best. But as the novel goes, I think it takes a direction where you really lose what makes the short story is such a beautiful piece of literature. So yeah, Flowers for Algernon, Daniel Keyes. Did I say David Keyes? It's Daniel Keyes. Wonderful. It's a wonderful novel. All of these, honestly, all of them deserve to be right up there. But that's where it's going to go. Flowers for Algernon, Daniel Keyes, 1966 Nebula Award winner. The short story, Hugo, 1960, would be the cream of the crop for me. Almost right up there as one of the best. But yeah, let me know. Have you read both? Where would you rank these two? Did you have the problems I had with the novel when compared to the short story? Or am I just wrong in my thinking here? So yes, Flowers for Algernon, Daniel Keyes, 1966, Nebula award-winning book. Wonderful book. Worthy of a Nebula. And it was shared, actually, that Nebula, with Delany's Babel 17. So another really good book. And it'd be interesting to see how those two stack up. So, you know, if you want to see where I think those two stack up when going head to head, please subscribe, like, comment, all those things. I'm looking forward to sharing my progress of this ladder with you on the Sci-Fi Shed.